Up to me this morning, first thing, and said, "You're not answering my text anymore?" I said, "Well, my phone's been out of blink for a week. I haven't been in contact with anybody." He said, "Well, I sent you a text, no problem, no big deal. Ask you what the title was." So I told him. I said, "Well, the title is I Can Do This," and I got the title to my next talk. Just about a day before he reminded me that I was speaking this Sunday. And my first thought initially was, I'm just moving, I'm just starting a new job, I'm really busy. And then I thought, I can do this. I can do this. So yes, we can do it. And years ago, I listened, and I've always enjoyed listening to talks, whether it's a sermon from a preacher who's from a minister, or whether it's because of the career that I used to have, sales talk. I always enjoyed a good talk. And I remember years ago heard a talk, and like so many other talks, they stay with you for the rest of your days. Something about the message, something about the way it was delivered, something that was said, sort of sticks with you. And I remember this one fellow, he was actually a youth pastor from down in the southern part of the United States. And he said, I grew up in a town where you did three things: go to church, shoot a deer, and play ball. And my daddy was the high school football coach. And he was a rough and tumble guy. He was an ex-Marine, and he had a buzz cut, and he used to roll your own cigarettes, and he was a tough guy. And because of that, he was the coach of the football team. I had to be on the football team, because my daddy wanted his boy to play ball. So I said, I remember I was in there before one of the games, and my father was giving us a pep talk. He said, my father stood up and he goes, "Now those boys over there, they're just like you fellas here. They put their pants on one leg at a time." and I put my hand up and I said, "Yeah, but Daddy, do you see the legs they're putting in them pants? One of those boys got hair in his legs, Daddy." So it was a real challenge, and he was giving them a pep talk for that challenge. And I want to talk to us today a little bit about some of the challenges that we face. And they're not, some of them are not what you'd think that they are. And I'm going to begin with the Apostle Paul. And the title of our talk today is I Can Do This. Paul said the exact same thing. He just said it in a little different way. And let me just find that right here. He said, "Not that I speak with respect of want." And I was hoping you'd stop actually talking after going too far, because that's my text, right? "Not that I speak with respect of want, for I have learned, in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed, both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." So that's just Paul saying, I can do this. And we're going to see this morning from the scriptures that Paul had many different experiences, many different circumstances. Some were, he was on the mountaintop certainly, but he also was in the valley. And for all of the circumstances that he found himself in, he said, and he had the attitude of, I can do this. We see Paul's words actually mirrored by the psalmist David, when David said, "I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made he heaven and earth." So David said, I'm going to look to the mountains, from where comes my help. And Paul even referred to that when he said, "I received my instruction from the Lord," or "I'm getting my help from the Lord. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." And so when he talks there about all things, he's talking about all of the different circumstances he has in life. And thank God that God is inclusive like that, because there's a room full of different people here, and your experience might be completely different than the experience of the person that's sitting next to you. I mean, your your path to get to church this morning might have been completely different than somebody else's. You know, yours, you might have had just a normal Sunday morning where you got up and did things routinely as you've done so many times before. Or perhaps something really good happened to you, maybe yesterday or this week, and you jumped out of bed and said, "Good morning, Lord," instead of rolling over and saying, "Good Lord, morning," right? So you could have come on a high. Or maybe you've had a very difficult and challenging week, and deep down you thought, "Oh, I think I'm just going to sleep in on Sunday. It's such a, I just feel like I need that time." But no, you got yourself up and you found your way here. Maybe it seemed a little bit longer of a drive than it usually is. So we all have different circumstances that we're in right now, each and every one of us. Life's actually is a series of adjustments. Some of those adjustments are stressful, and some of them can be challenging. So Paul says, "I know how to," in that verse, he said, "I know how to be abased." In other words, I know what it's like to have a rough time. He said, "You're having a problem, things are down, things are really rough. I know what that feels like," Paul says, because I've been through that. But he also says, "I know what it's like," or "I know how to abound." You're having a really great day? Well, I've had good days too. I know what that feels like. Some good things have happened to you. Well, I know what that feels like, because some good things have happened to me. So we all face different circumstances in our life. And I was thinking about how change and how circumstances cause stress in our lives. And actually, it's quite surprising. Some of the obvious things cause stress in our life. For instance, the death of a good friend is a very stressful situation. And this one company, they do a scale. And the biggest stressor was 100. And then it went down from there. And the death of a spouse was number 100. And then there was a divorce was another one right there. And there was a couple of the three big ones. But I thought, I'm just going to go down a little bit farther down to some of the things that we experience more often in our lives. And the death of a friend, that scored 37 on the scale. And the higher up you go, the more likely you were to suffer from a stress-related illness or to miss work or that kind of a thing. So death of a loved one. And we've all been to one too many funerals from people that we know. And I guess that's one of the side effects of living too long, right? If you live long enough, your friends are going to start to go before you. Another one was trouble with the boss. That's less stressful than the death of a friend, but that's scored number 23. Having a mortgage over $20,000. All right? That scored number 31. That's more stressful, having a mortgage, than having trouble at work. Right? So those are some negative things that, well, of course, Bob, that's I can understand that. Well, here's some other things that were on that list. Getting ready to go on a vacation. That was stressful. Now, mind you, it was only 13 on the scale, so it wasn't that stressful. But nevertheless, it was stressful because you've got to do some planning and all of those things. Here's one. Outstanding personal achievement. You did way better than you thought you would. That scored number 28. That's more stressful than having trouble with the boss. Almost as stressful as having a mortgage. Here's another one. Having a mortgage less than $20,000. That's number 17 on the scale. That's more stressful than a vacation. So whether you have, in other words, as things change, you have to adapt. And as you adapt, there's going to be some stress involved in your life. And some of the stress, you don't even know it. Have you ever found in your life where you're going through a circumstance and you thought you were dealing well, and then all of a sudden one day you woke up and the sun was just a little bit brighter and the birds were singing just a little bit more fervently and everything seemed to be good, and you realize, I didn't even realize how much stress I was under about all that until it lifted, right? See, so there's stress that comes on us and we don't know. So every day we're faced with a choice. Every day we're given the opportunity to make a choice. And the choice is, am I going to go this alone, or am I going to acknowledge Him in all my ways and let Him direct my paths? So Paul the Apostle was a person of great substance. He was highly educated, he was highly motivated, he was highly respected, but he said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You see, every day we're given the opportunity to make a choice. I can do this on my own, or I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You see, Paul, the apostle, understood that he needed to do all things through Christ. Paul's all things were very different than our all things, because Paul he lived in a different time than us. He had a much different life than us. Listen to some of the all things that Paul talked about here. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11, he said, of the Jews, 5 times received I 40 stripes, save one. 5 times. 5 times. Twice was I beaten with rods. Once was I stoned. Thrice I suffered shipwreck. A night and a day I have been in the deep. In journeyings often, in perils of water, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness and painfulness, in watchings, often in hunger and in thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness. Paul's all things were much different than my all things. I think mine are easier. They say that if you were in a room full of people and you're all sitting in a circle and everybody took their problems and put them in the middle, and you're looking at them, all the problems that you have and all the problems everybody else has, and then somebody rang the bell and you had to grab a pile of problems, I think we'd go for our own. I think I'd grab mine, because at least I'm used to mine, right? I'm used to my all things. I'm used to them and dealing with them for a long time. But make no mistake about it, I do have that pile of all things. And make no mistake about it, even though we might not see it on Sunday morning, you probably have that pile of all things as well. Is that not correct? Yeah. So when Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, it means that whatever challenges and whatever problems I have in my life, through Christ I can deal with it. Through Christ I can look at them and I can say, I can do that. Yes. I got a challenge, but I can do that, because I'm not going to try to do it alone. I'm going to do it with the help of Christ. Because of the all things that Paul went through, we have part of my favorite portion of Scripture in Romans chapter 8. And this to me is just, in my Bible, that's kind of like the most used, most brown. Pastor, I'm sure your Bible's like that too, but then there's some sections that are, I was looking at some sections this morning and I'm thinking, I've had this thing for 40-some years and I don't think I've ever opened that page. It's just white. It's just as white as a snowbank. But this one, listen to this. Listen to what Paul says here. This is just awesome. He says, for we are saved by hope. But hope that is seen is not hope. Right? We don't see the end of it yet. We don't see the resolution to our problems and our challenges just yet. For what a man seeth, why doth he yet hope for? But if we hope for that we see not, then do we with patience wait for it. Likewise the Spirit also helpeth our infirmities. For we know not what we should pray for as we ought, but the Spirit itself maketh intercession for us with groanings which cannot be muttered. And he that searches the heart knoweth what is the mind of the Spirit, because he maketh intercession for the saints according to the will of God. And we know, here's this phrase again, all things. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Then just skip down a little bit. What shall we say then to these things? What are you going to say to all of the circumstances that you face in your life? What are you going to say to the circumstances when things don't look like what you'd like them to look? What are you going to say when the road takes a turn that you weren't planning on taking? What are you going to say when the challenges of life seem to be piling up? What shall we say to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? He that spared not his own Son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things? Who shall say anything to the charge of God's elect? It is God that justifies. Who is he that condemneth? It is Christ that died, yea, rather, that is risen again, who is even at the right hand of God, and who maketh intercession for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? As it is written, for thy sake are we killed all the day long. We are accounted as sheep to the slaughter. Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor powers, nor principalities, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. And so with confidence we can know that no matter what our circumstances, no matter what our trials, that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. You see, our Heavenly Father wants us to look on both the challenges and the opportunities that are in our lives, and he wants us to say, I can do that. He wants us to look at the hard days and say, I can do that. And he wants us to look at the days when there seems to be opportunities ahead of us and say, I can do that as well. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And he wants us to know that he is there to help. He wants us to know that. Now let's take a look at the story of Jericho. The walls of Jericho. Those walls were about 13, 15 feet high. And they were made of stone. They're building a foundation stone, and there was stone. And there was a retaining wall, of course. And there was two walls there. Every so many feet there was a tower, and in that tower was a guards person watching out, protecting that city. And God said to, well, I'm going to turn to it here, Joshua chapter 6. I'm not going to read a whole lot of it, but there. So God says, he says this. Listen to what he says at the beginning of the chapter. God told Joshua, see, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. So God says to Joshua, I've given you Jericho. Meanwhile, Joshua's out there with his crowd, and they're looking up at these big walls. And they're looking at the towers and looking at the guards in the tower and all the fortifications. They're still looking at that tower and that wall when God says, I've given you Jericho. And I've given you the king, and I've given you the mighty men of valor. The mighty men of valor. I can just imagine that pep talk. I can just imagine Joshua to his army. You know those mighty men of valor? They put their armor on just like we do, one leg at a time. Right? They still had to go in and take that. So Joshua could have looked and said, well, we can't take that city. But what did God tell them? He did the same thing for them that he does for me and that he does for you. He doesn't lay the whole thing out in front of us and says, go at it. No. God said, well, okay, fine. Maybe I'm not going to ask you to take it. I've given it to you, but can you get together and can you walk around the city once today? Can you do that? Can you get the priests together and can you walk around and can you do that? Well, yeah, we can do that. You're all right then? Tomorrow morning. Do you think you can do it again? Well, yes, we can do that again. And what about again? Can you do that? Can you do it every day for a week? Just walk around the place. And then on the seventh day, I want you to shout and I want you to blow your horns, and then the walls are going to come down. You see, you don't handle all that in one shot. Those mighty men of valor, they didn't become mighty men of valor all at once. They did it one day at a time. One training session at a time. One war game at a time. One day at a time. And they did, in fact, put their armor on one leg at a time. But it didn't happen overnight. It happened day after day, years of training and preparation. And so God will help us to fight our battles, but he's going to do it one day at a time. He's going to do it one step at a time. He will help us prepare for our challenges. So they did see victory, but they didn't have to do it all at once. They just followed God's direction, and they marched around the city, and all of a sudden, those walls came tumbling down. You see, God is probably not asking you to do the whole thing either. God might be asking you to do one small thing. You know, the beautiful thing about having goals, and I talked about this, maybe not the last time, but the time before. The beautiful thing about having goals is that they keep you focused on something, right? That's why Paul mentions in the scriptures, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. When Christ is our goal, then we automatically do things to keep us in line with that goal. When Christ is the goal, we automatically do all kinds of make little decisions that are going to help us to be more Christ-like. We don't get down on our knees and ask for forgiveness and then step up and walk through some kind of a magic portal and we're all of a sudden Christ-like. For some of us, it takes a whole lifetime, right? Because some of us aren't as enthusiastic about the way as others. But for the folks that say, you know what, I can do that and not worry about the cost of it, they seem to make more strides. So God helps us to do things one thing at a time. I know a woman that became an artist once she was in her 60s. You might say to me, but Bob, I could never be an artist. Well, that might be true, but could you take an art class? Could you? Could you sign up if you want to be an artist? Could you sign up for an art class, a beginner one? And could you get in your car and drive to the class on Wednesday night from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, if that's when the class is? Could you do that? Probably everybody would say, well, yeah, Bob, I could do that. And could you apply yourself? Well, yeah, I could do that. And then once this is over, then maybe next year you could take an intermediate class. Think you could do that? Well, yeah, I could. You see, all God's expecting of you is just to sign up for that class. That's all you got to do tomorrow is just sign up. That's it. How many could do that? Right? And then once you sign up, just to go. I remember when I was a minister. I remember one gentleman called me, and he actually was one of the board members, and he said, "Reverend, I'm going to try to be in church on Sunday morning." So I go, "Well, what does that mean? Are you going to try to set your alarm? Are you going to try to get dressed? Are you going to try to start your car? What does that mean?" In other words, he wasn't planning on coming, but he just didn't want to say it, right? I'm going to try. I'm going to try. Well, no. We don't have to do the whole thing at once. We just got to do little bits. I know a gentleman who was a nurse. He was a nurse. He was working as a nurse. He was married, and he had kids, and he decided that he didn't want to be a nurse for the rest of his life. He decided that he wanted to be a doctor. And today, he's a family doctor working in Summerside. So you might say to me, well, Bob, I could never be a doctor, or I could never be an architect, or I could never be a fisherman, or I could never be whatever it might be. Well, okay, that might be true, but do you think you could apply for the course that you're interested in? You think you could do that? Well, yeah, anybody can apply. Do you think that if you got accepted, you could attend class and study and work? Well, yeah, I could probably do that, Bob. You see, no one's asking to become a doctor or an architect or a lawyer or a fisherman or whatever it might be today. You just got to take that next step, you see? Because what's way down there next year is not there today. It's only that one next step, and we can do that. I know another guy who walked clean across this country. I mean, right from Newfoundland right to Vancouver Island. Clean across. You might say, well, Bob, I could never do that. Well, you might never have to, but could you walk across the street to encourage your neighbor? Could you do that? Probably, right? Not all of us have the inkling or the calling or the desire or the resources to walk right across this country, but all of us have our own walk. And it's amazing if you start to walk just a little ways. You know, you start with a little walk, and then the next day it's a little bit easier, and the next day a little bit easier. I'm not talking just about physical walking, but I'm talking about your walk of life, right? You start off, and then it's amazing. You don't have to go that far as long as you're heading in the same direction. Eventually you get somewhere. One of my friends told me, he said, my mother, when she was 60 years old, she started walking an hour a day. And she's been walking an hour a day for the last 23 years. We have no idea where she is now, but see, if you just start that first step, and if you just keep on going, you actually will get somewhere. See, it's up to you. The point is that God doesn't ask to do the whole thing right now. He doesn't ask you that, right? He gives you something to do today. And sometimes as long as you're doing what needs to be done today, sometimes you don't even see the big picture. Sometimes you don't even see where you're going to end up. As long as you keep doing what you can do today. As long as when something is put before you, you look at it and say, well, I can do that. Okay, try it. I can do that. Most people's initial is, oh, I can't do it. No, I can do that. And then put yourself out a little bit, right? As long as it's like, somebody says, oh, you want to operate on do open heart surgery? Well, no. But if it's something that's there in your life or in your situation, I can do that. Some people's default is, no, I can't do that. No, I've never done that before. No, I'm not young enough or smart enough or rich enough or strong enough. No, I can't. But if you said, I can do that, you might be surprised at what you could accomplish. I can do that with Christ's help. You see, it doesn't end there. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Maybe you're here today and you have a big challenge. Maybe you're here today and you're looking up at a mountain, just like the Israelites were looking up at the walls of Jericho. Maybe you're here today, you're looking at a mountain, and the only thing you have in your hand is a shovel. What are you going to do? You can say, well, no, that's just too much. It's a mountain. I could never. Or you can say, I can do that. And just start. And just start. And it's amazing if you keep on going where you might end up. See, the challenges in our lives and the things that cause stresses in our lives are both the good things, the opportunities. The opportunity, going to school, the opportunity, getting a career, the opportunity, building addition onto your home, the opportunity, having a new relationship, the opportunity, making new friends. All of those things carry their degree of stress. The opportunity, getting involved in the church, getting involved in the community. They all carry with them some stress, right? There's also other things that carry stress. Those are the things that we all face. Maybe there's sickness. Maybe there's a death in the family. Maybe there's a loss. Maybe there's a loss of a job. Maybe there's financial stress. Maybe there's a lot of things that are there too. Both of them cause stress. But to look at both those situations and say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do that. You see, without faith, it is impossible to please God. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. We have to believe that if we take the step, we're going to get somewheres. We have to believe that if we plant the seed, there's going to be a harvest. We have to believe that if we make the effort, there's going to be a result. That's even the law of nature, right? For every reaction, there is an equal and opposite reaction. In everything in this world around us, it's the way it was created. And in everything we do, there's a consequence. In everything. In everything. So our attitude and our approach to things greatly affects the result. If I say I can't, I'm really tying God's hands. If I say I can't, I'm really tying God's hands. But if I say I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, I'm really giving God the opportunity to make himself strong on my behalf. And so I encourage you today, when you look at those words of the Apostle Paul, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It means both the positive things and the negative things that will come across your path. It's just your attitude is going to make all the difference in the world. I can do that. You know what? Even if you come to church on Sunday morning and you come with a need and you need to be encouraged and you need someone to pray, it's not a walk across the country. It's just a walk up to the altar. It's just a few steps to come up, and before you leave this place, to spend some time in prayer and to ask. Say, Lord, I need your help in this situation. A lot of times the people who suffer the worst from things are people who deny the reality that's in their life. They call it neurosis, right? When you, and people that live in families where there's a problem, and they try to make everything look really good and perfect. Everybody knows underneath what it's really like. And it causes a stress in you, and it causes a tension in you, and eventually you'll pay the price. Neurosis. To deny something that's real. Because your mind knows it's real, your heart knows it's real. Right? So lots of times people say, well, I'm okay, I don't need help. But to admit, I only went to one Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in my life. I was just curious. I was in a strange town. No one knew who I was, so I figured I'll go there, and I'll go to the meeting, and then I'll leave. And everybody that got up to speak that night said, hi, my name is Joe Blow, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, my name is Jane Brown, and I'm an alcoholic. Everybody. I didn't say anything. But hi, my name is Bob Burke, and I'm not an alcoholic. No. But see, that was the first step. The first step was admitting that they were an alcoholic and asking for the help. The people who said, no, I can handle this, I can quit whatever I want, they're the ones that are still kidding themselves. They're the ones that are living under a delusion, right? But the ones that say, well, I need help, and I'm going to ask for help, that's the first step to getting something done. That's the same for the bad things it is for the good things. I want to do this, but it seems so big, but I'm going to take that first step. That doctor that's in Summerside, imagine going back to medical school from a nurse. And nothing wrong with being a nurse. Nurse is a great profession, but he just worked with enough doctors and he said, I want to do that. And he went back. Imagine the sacrifice that was. Can you imagine the financial sacrifice that was to that family? Right? There's a full-time income coming in. All of a sudden it's not there. How many years do you go to school to be a doctor? A lot. And let me tell you, I know a little bit about how much debt they have when they start their careers. It's not insignificant. Huge, huge challenge, huge price to pay. But today, he's a doctor. He's a doctor, right? He did it. Didn't do it overnight, but he did it. And it's never too late. It's never too late to stand up and say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. What is your all things? What is it? Last time I spoke, I said this phrase, this quote. Mark Twain said this: two most important days in a person's life is the day they were born and the day they realize why they were born. Why they were born. So, I can do all things. What are my all things? Christ will help. Let's stand.